Hello and welcome back to the Smartbuild implementation series. We're in part 22. This is to just talking about material list and different ways that you can set up different outputs and then also the order of those outputs. So with this job I have here in front of me, looking at my sample database I've created, I've tweaked it a bit just to give you an example. But when I go into my job review, you'll notice I have a category that says foundation, then I have framing, trusses, sheeting, trim, doors, windows, accessories, subcontracts, and freight. So these are a little bit different than what you'll see out of the box. And I want to talk about that part first, and then we'll get into some of the outputs. So when you go to your settings from your home menu, and if you just signed up with Smartbuild, this is the template you get as a starting point. We have an area that says output categories. And these are your default categories. This is what we have hard coded in the back end in Smartbuild. So you start out with framing, sheeting, trim, doors, windows, and all that. So for some companies, what's came up is, I'd rather have my own categories. I want to customize these. And you can now do that. In the beginning, you couldn't, but now you can do that. And there are some things to think about and consider if you do go ahead and do that. And if you start moving these around and you get all confused and you said, hey, I'd like to just go back to where I was, you can always restore to your default and get back to this point. So looking at these categories, so one example may be, well, why would you want to do what I did? And why would you want to set up another category, call it foundation? So, and the only thing I did here was I moved some of these items from framing over to foundation. And one thing that comes up, and this has came up in the past, where some people don't want concrete products and brackets, different things related to the foundation, showing up in the framing area. So I just created a new category. I click add here, and we could call it, foundation. And I could even move these up or down so that the order. So if you want to move this up, you can click the up button here, move these up. And then this allows you, after you've created the category, you could come into here and select any items and say move, and move them into whatever you want to move them into. So just like that, now when I go into foundation, I've got foundation, base, and uplift. So the reason this is important to understand and why we're talking about this related to material lists is because the order of these control what you see on your material list. So when we're in a job and we go to framing, we see posts first, we see jam posts, we see skirt boards. We see these in a certain order. And again, I've tweaked these and I've set these up the way that I like to see them. And if you go back to your database, out of the box, you're going to see it's in this order. So again, it starts out with top track, bottom track, end stud, stud header. So you may want to start customizing these and make them in an order that you want. And maybe the order is fine when you first come in here. Maybe it looks okay to what you want. Great. But one example would be we could take posts, we could move it to the top. So now we could start out, posts would be the first item on our list. And you have to keep in mind that there's several types of posts. So you may want to select all the posts, and just have to move those up. So if I find my jam post, move it to the top, and so on, until we have all the posts at the top. Because again, there are several different posts in a job. So I'm just going to pick anything that has posts, and I'm going to move it to the top. So again, I'm not going to spend any more time doing this. You can rearrange these, get them in the order that you want. And if you don't think this is necessary at this point, you may decide to come back to this later. So set up your categories that you want. You can even rename existing categories. And it may be that you don't like the term labor. You just want to call it subcontracts. That's a term that some people would prefer to use because it's items that in a job, in a project, that they're contracting to some other company. So it's not done by their company. So again, you can name these however you want. You may have more. Keep in mind, if you do add very many, it starts to become a little unwieldy in a job because you can't see them all and they start to disappear behind a scroll bar. So keep that in mind and abbreviate them the best that you can. That's going to keep these shorter so you can see them better. And again, after you're done with that, the question is, well, how does that interact with my material list? And then also the question of, your entire setup, everything that you've done so far, there may be some tweaking that we have to do to make these all line up. And one example would be packages. If you've set up packages before, I'm going to go ahead and save this new category of foundation so that you can see what happens. So I've saved that. Now when I go into packages, maybe I had an item related to concrete that was going into, maybe it was going into labor. And I had this foundation package I've set up. Well, now since I have this foundation category, it may make sense to add this. Maybe I don't want it in subcontracts. I want it in the foundation. So I could add it to foundation. I could save it. So when you go back into your packages, these new categories will now be available to apply items to. So anything, it could be any one of these, and just pick a random package. And when you go into it and you could see the output category, you now have these new choices that you set up along the way. So keep that in mind. Just has to do with setting up your material lists and the order those show up when you're in a job. So they'll show up in that category and then in the order of their usage, and then all the package items will just show up at the bottom. So again, and if you want to order and structure those package items in a certain way, you could use lettering. I've seen that done where you can have A, B, C, and D in front of your packages to where it orders these in the correct way. Because right now it just logs them all with this double hyphen here. So that can be done. And now moving over on into outputs, the second part of this discussion, if you have your database set up where your part numbers all line up with your point of sale, which is the number one go, obviously. And the question is, well, how can I set up an output that I could quickly print out or email and have someone pull these materials from a lumberyard or whatever, or maybe my own material yard that I have? What's a really good output that we could use for that? And again, if you're signing up from Smartbuild today, you're going to see one in here that's called a PDF pick list. And if we look under the hood, it's basically we're using this job bid type output. And again, we've done some work beforehand just to optimize this to kind of what we expect you to want. But basically, it ignores things like freight and all this. But keep in mind, if you change your categories, they'll show up in here. So if you decide to exclude certain items, you may not need those on this pull list. Like subcontracts, I really might not need that when it comes to items I'm pulling from the yard, because this is just going to have like labor fees, things like that in it. So again, think about that as you're setting up this report. But basically, this is a PDF pick list. It's called that if you sign up, if you have a new database. It may be called something else, or you can create your own just by selecting the job bid, which is the top type output here. Select the job bid, check what you want to be part of, and you can even add your own disclaimer text here, like maybe please check this material list or whatever any note that you want to remind your guys, whoever's pulling the material from the yard. So again, that one can be set up, and then when we look at this, what this looks like, it may just be, and mine's called job bid here, but if I download this and look at it, we'll see what it looks like. So if we review this job bid or the PDF pick list that was set up, this one, it would have your logo here, the customer's info here, and then again, every category that you select to show up. And these would show up in the order that they're in the usages. So these materials here, anything that you select to turn on, they would show up here on this list. Now this one has itemized pricing and all that. So if you don't want this itemized list, we have other outputs you could use. So let's look at what our options would be. If I'm going into my outputs, maybe this itemized material list, again, this one is the job bid. And if we want to set up another one that has custom columns, that would be, we can use the job data PDF. Now this is where we get a lot of questions around this one. And it's just, how do I set this up? Because there's so many ways you can set up this job data PDF. And a good way to start to set this one up is, don't start with the PDF. Let's start with the CSV, because there's also a job data CSV. So if you click add, select job data CSV from this list, and it says if you leave the job infos blank, this will populate all of them. So just go ahead and set one up and leave that blank. So when you do that, what will happen is it kind of tells you what all is available. So if we set up the job data CSV, we leave this blank and we click save, and we save this output, we can get an entire file showing every category or every column that you could populate on this document. So if I look at this first one, I'm just going to output this job data CSV, this one that I've created. So here you can see every single field that you could use. So if you can see this file here, so we have usage, we have description, we have SKU. Basically, every single one of these strings can be used to create your own custom file. So if you look at this, the first thing I would do is just start with the complete file and start eliminating anything that you don't want to have on that report. So if you don't want price and cost and selling unit and all that, we could just start by eliminating some of these. And if I just delete these columns, just to minimize what we have here. So you may choose to leave the usage, maybe not. So we reduce this. Now basically we could take these strings and we could paste them into that field and create our own custom document. And here's how we do that. So if you take that data and you go into outputs, and we could come into this job data CSV. If you look at this paradigm file, that's the way it's set up. And it's using different columns. And again, you may use this one, maybe it's fine. I'm just showing you how to create your own in order to create basically any combination of these SKUs. So you have the SKU, and you need to put a semicolon in between there. And then if you want a description for that, you could type in SKU, and that's basically the heading. So we have semicolon, and this is what it's going to show at the top of the page. And then I'm going to do the same for description. And I'm going to go through here and I'm going to update this one so you can see what happens when I update. I'm just going to put FT for feet. Need a semicolon missing here. I'm going to add inches here. We're going to add quantity, abbreviate that. And we've got a usage. Do all caps on that. So we can go through, and I've just updated this. So what happens, let's review this a little bit. So I have a full SKU, semicolon. Now this is the heading, and then I have a comma. Now this is the field that we use internally, so this description field, and then we have a semicolon, and then this is the heading. So if I save this, here's what we would get in a job. So I went ahead and saved that. Now if I go to my test job and I output this, we need the paradigm document here. The paradigm version is the one I've just updated just as an example. So in this case, I come in here, my heading is missing. So what did I do wrong? So if I go back to that document and look at it, you'll notice, we're going to go back to that outputs again, you'll notice that we need to include the heading. And that's a setting you can turn on or off. So if I go to this paradigm file, omit header row is turned on. So I want to turn that off so I can see that header. So if I save this now, go ahead and save this and then re-export the paradigm version, you're going to see that we do get the header. And again, depending on your point of sale that you're using, you may need the header. For paradigm and the way it was set up, it did not need the header. But again, this could be set up and formatted in about any version that you need based off your point of sale. So we'll take a look at this example here. So now you can see the text that I've added is showing up. My caps, feet, inches, quantity, usage, those are all showing up here as the heading, and then everything is in line. Now notice my order, posts are first, truss bearers are next, skirt boards are next. Again, you can adjust. That kind of comes back to the first part of this video where we talked about that. So just recapping again here. So in settings, you can go to outputs. Again, you can set up PDF material lists where maybe you just want to print these out and you don't need to import them into any point of sale or whatever. Or you can set these versions up as a CSV file, call them whatever you want. Maybe you want to call them whatever your point of sale is called. And so then you could material list, again, the idea that, and what I want to accomplish with this video is the process would be you design a job in Smartbuild. You can quickly get a material list that you can print off if your customer needs an itemized bid, we can do that. Or if your customer doesn't need it, but someone in a yard or a lumberyard needs it to pull these materials from stock. So we can set up a output to do that. And then the next idea with this would be is how can we set up a document to allow to import this into a point of sale system? And that's like this paradigm example that I've created. So again, those three We've kind of went through all those. There may be other outputs that you decide, and if you want to customize these, you can even have several versions of this. So what would the use case of that be? Well, one use case would be is if you are setting up Smartbuild in a way that you're going to have different supplier SKUs added. With the supplier SKU, what you can do is you can go through all of the items in your entire database and you can add a supplier SKU. And then that in turn can filter out and go into different reports. So how would we do that? So let's look at framing, for example. If we go into framing and just look at your 2x4 SPF or whatever your framing item is, if you come in here and you add a supplier ID, maybe this comes from Lumber ABC. I'm just making something up here. This is the supplier ID. Now, if I save that and I go into my outputs, and with my output, I set up an output that only filters out and pulls items that have the text exactly the same way of Lumber ABC, I would only get 2x4s on this output. So you could set up one way to think about this is you could have a lumber output. We could call this paradigm lumber, or maybe it's just lumber. Call it whatever you want. This one would just filter out with lumber, and it would be filtered out by using this ABC ID. So that's just one way to think about it. Maybe you have a window and door output. You get that from a certain supplier, and that would have a different supplier ID. Maybe it's window and door, just whatever. You can set those up however, but basically you can have as many of these as you want. And to add new ones, you can simply click add, find the type. If you're trying to create it's the job data CSV, you can set that, you can name it what you want. And again, you can just copy those columns over. So if you want the same type of columns, you could grab them out of here. I could just copy them, copy, and then paste into that new one that I've just created. So again, you can do that, and we will be glad to help you if you have issues to get these all set up. I'm just showing you this, so not saying you have to do this by yourself. It's just something that we want to give you the tools to get this done if you want, and then we want you to understand what is possible, because you can really streamline, from a job to turning into an order, outputting the material list, having it in the correct order, what your team likes to see. That's all, it's all really nice to have, and we have those capabilities. So hopefully that has shown you that this can be done with the output categories, arranging them in the order that you want them, setting up your company's output categories that you like, and then just, working through some sample jobs, seeing what the material lists look like, and then trying an output. So if we consider all that, that's a lot of information in this short video, but the outputs can be organized in several different ways. And we do have some API integrations that we can help you with. We're integrating with Sabrus and a few others that we can automate from an API. We can take the material list here where you can skip over these outputs. Maybe you don't want to deal with having to download a data file. We can automate it with an API where if you make it a quote or make it an order, it could send the material list directly. And again, this setup, all that we've talked about, it's all still very important because you want to go through and make sure that your materials are in the correct order, obviously before you output and push those material lists. You want them to be in the correct order. So the output categories would be very important for that. So again, thanks for watching. I hope this helps everyone, and we'll see you next time.